see in the back, we're in the airport, and we're behind us is a beautiful mountain range, the Cordillera of Cochabamba, and we're very lucky to be right here in the airport with one of the delegates from New York State, Roberto Lovato, who's been here at the conference covering it for The Nation magazine, but also just being here as a fellow traveler, checking out the scene at the conference on the Climate Change, People's World Congress on Climate Change and the Rights of Mother Earth, Rights of Pachamama. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Claire.
We're really glad to have you. In particular, here we are now at the end of our trip.
Mm-hmm.
We've been here for about a week. Came in on the same plane about a week ago. First, tell our listeners, why did you come? This is a long way to go for a conference. You've probably been to plenty in your life. Why this one?
I've been to a lot of international forums on human rights, on racism, but I've never been to one on green issues, on the ecology. And I've personally been feeling some urgency about these matters, like every human being that breathes, that drinks water, that has family with skin cancer. So. And to have it in Bolivia, a country that's really at its core committed to indigenous people and committed to, the beliefs and the culture of indigenous people, and mixing that with, ideas about things like revolution. I find it totally fascinating. I interviewed Evo Morales 2007, and I saw him and I was very impressed with him, and I thought I wanted to come again. I want to see the country that gave us Evo Morales and the movement.
Is this your first time here in Bolivia?
It's my first time in Bolivia, yes.
And how did you spend your time? It flew by, but where were you? What did you see? What did you hear? What impressed you?
Well, I've spent something like 20 years focusing on immigration issues. I came here on behalf of The Nation magazine and New American Media, and I spent a good amount of my time seeking out people to write some stories, some of the seeking out some really brilliant, fascinating, powerful, inspiring people. And I found them in droves.
Where were they from? Were they local? Were they from around the world?
They were from around the world. I interviewed a woman from Malaysia who's a brilliant lawyer, Ling Li Ling, who does biodiversity and, was there with Presidents Chavez and Morales talking about issues of biodiversity and other threats. And then to watch these people like Chavez or like Tomas Borja from Nicaragua, who's one of the great guerrilla commanders of Nicaragua during the Sandinista era, and to see him talking green was whoa for me, because and then that shows kind of like one of the things I most carried back with me was from hearing all these fascinating people, watching them fuse all these different strands of thought, of political, cultural, ecological thought. So when you hear, for example, the slogan, Planeta o Muerte, planet or death, that's a riff on a variation on a slogan that, in Latin America used to be very popular in the 60s, 70s, even the 80s. Revolución o muerte, patria o muerte, revolution or death. Something that has zero meaning in the United States except when you touch the dead wig of George Washington. And so, people here actually are still thinking about what revolution means. It's not, revolution here is not a museum piece. And to watch people thinking about revolution, but in the context of we basically need a fundamental reconfiguration of the planet's political, economic, military, cultural structure, is the stuff of revolution. I think if George Washington and Enlightenment era people were facing the great crisis we were, some of them more thoughtful among them would surely say we need a revolution now.
And what does revolution mean to you? And what kind of revolution are we really calling for here?
Well, I don't know what revolution is going to be. I'm not that smart, but I can see trends and threads of revolutionary thought evolving. For example, the critique to civilization that people in Bolivia, indigenous thinkers and other thinkers here have, is extraordinary. To look at climate crisis as a manifestation of diseased civilization, a civilization that's run out of its, as another one of the brilliant people I met here, Veronica, I'm a little tired, so Veronica was the chief negotiator for Bolivia and the UN on climate change. Mm-hmm. She told me that, it's a civilizational problem at its core. That the air didn't get dirtied by the Quechua people selling, fruits and vegetables on the street. It got, it got dirtied and destroyed by big corporations that have controlled the planet for some time, and that's got to stop. Their control is killing us.
You talked about being impressed with the lives and the understanding of the world of the indigenous peoples here. Did you have a chance to interview any of them? Did you tell us what you learned from that?
Well, I had an opportunity before the conference started. I came a little early, and I spent some time in an indigenous community outside of Tikipaya. Took a hike, and I actually got a lot of material for a story that I'm writing for the nation on about climate migration, which is kind of a new incoming analysis in immigrants, around immigration. I mean, in the United States, we talk about immigration in the simple terms of within the borders of the United States. It's a simplistic, base, and very dangerous way to talk about immigration when you consider the reality that immigration involves internal factors and external push factors that push people to leave their homes. I mean, the idea that people leave Latin America to go pursue the American dream is an abject joke and a lie, especially since the American dream is dead. And it's not coming back. Less than 24% of people in the United States surveyed say that they're living the American dream. So it's on its way out. We're reaching a great crisis that I think the teabaggers reflect. The lack of political direction from the left in the United States, for example, makes it palatable for the right to take advantage of those poor, mostly poor and middle-class white workers whose lives are being devastated, transformed fundamentally, like whites in the United States have never had to face before.
The whole question of the American dream, it got totally corrupted, because when the original idea, if you go back to 1957 and 50s, the average middle-class house was just under 1,000 square feet. We're talking 1,000 square foot house, maybe one car. People lived a much reduced lifestyle, and that was considered aspirational. Have a job, have a small house. You had a room, the kids had a room, and a small yard, and that was what people wanted. And now they want McMansions, they want that, and it's been totally corrupted into thinking that when you have American political leaders saying our way of life is not negotiable, well, what way of life? The way of life where Americans are 20 tons per person per year of carbon dioxide, 4% of the global population, and producing 30 to 40% of 25% now of the emissions currently, and historically 30 to 40. It's totally out of whack. And so I think I agree with you. I think that the American dream as it was has to be completely rewritten, and that's where that anger comes from, because people were told they could have this and that there would be no harm to anyone. And the reality is the American aggressive lifestyle of consumption is not only harmful to other people, it's harmful to the very survival.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the time I spent with the Quechua community, that for decades, maybe even 100 years, has lived off of the carnation industry, claveles. And, they have their own water management system that they showed me that dates back to the Arabs. Acequia system that it's worked for hundreds, thousands of years all over the world, and they were still living, but they're facing a big problem now in that there are fundamental changes to their way of life in their community, because the carnations used to take like a month to dry up and die. So you had a month to pick them and transport them. Now it takes a week, they told me, in the past 10 years. And when that happens, then that has effects on the family, beginning with the fact that there's less work, less income, and the family members have to then pick up and go to the north or to other Latin American countries. And that's an example of what we call climate migration. The climate heating up is devastating these people's, old way of life and their families and even their languages, because you lose people, you lose language. You lose people, you lose culture. And, but on the other hand, these are the dynamics that are driving the ferocious political culture of Bolivia, which is at the heart of this whole conference. The Bolivian people, but in particular, the indigenous people, because this is an majority indigenous country. So to come here and learn about the political culture, the ancient culture that brought us the first indigenous president in Bolivia in 500 years was just something of another order for me personally. And I've traveled all over the world in a lot of different settings, but this was unique for me. I come back very inspired and overwhelmed even.
Did anything at the conference surprise you?
that we had 35 or more thousand people show up from around the world, mostly from Bolivia, but that's intense. 49 countries sent representatives, presidents, and others. And what really surprised me, I really didn't expect to see the unique mix of ecological thought, indigenous thought and practice, and revolutionary thought from the 70s and 80s and 60s mixed together. But that's because that's also what's at the heart of this conference, is that the political thinking of what is arguably the most radical piece of real estate on the planet, Latin America. Latin America, in all the global forums that I go to, tends to come out and be the stars of the movie, so to speak. I mean, there's great things happening in Africa, in Asia, but there's nothing like what's happening on the insurgent continent of Latin America. And I mean, the fact that they're sponsoring this global conference is an example of their vision and the culture and the political capabilities.
Was there anything that you had difficulty with, that you felt you would have liked to have seen be different, change, that if this conference were to happen again, how would you like them to
do? Well, they put this together in pretty short order. They put it together in a few months after Copenhagen's failure. They called it, and it would have been nice to have a little more time, I think, for them to really polish some rough edges around the technology. There were some technological problems and program issues, but wow, what they've accomplished in so little time is stunning. And people from the U.S. should be proud that on the tech front, U.S.-based tech people held up, were part of the holding up the whole thing, because all the Europeans that were supposed to come on tech didn't get to come because of what happened in Europe with the canceled flights.
And that's another thing. It's kind of amazing when you consider I've heard numbers from 35,000 all the way to 43,000. Taxi driver I had last night was just telling me how proud he was of Bolivia, how much it meant to him that they were taking a lead on climate change. But also, one thing that I loved about this conference, and that I like about it being in the South, is that everyone I've talked to, all the people who are living in Bolivia, it's been a mass education on climate change. And they're all talking about it, they all understand it, they all see that it's revolutionary. No one here questioned the reality of climate change. They see it, they feel it, it's in their lives. I was here myself with a group of indigenous Peruvians from 3 different communities in the high Andes. All of whom were talking about the glaciers melting back, dramatically. And in one community, basically, the elders have said, when the last piece of ice is gone, it's the end of the world. And the ice is going. And they see it every day. They know it's real. And it's so shocking to be from a country where there actually is a public debate about whether or not climate change is real. Mm-hmm. What was your experience with that?
I saw that. I saw some, the Cochabamba is the heartland of radical revolutionary Latin America, indigenous Latin America, for what they've accomplished here. Because there's a direct line from the water wars, the victory against Bechtel and the water wars, to the election of the first indigenous president in 500 years. So I was very fascinated by the exchange between that awesome power and the power of people from around the world that are doing things around the environment and ecology, and to watch those back and forth. I think it's as much about, it's not even just about either revolutionizing the ecological movement or greening the revolutionary movement, but there's something else that we're creating, and there's already, and there was discussion of that, about, you see it in the critique of civilization, you see it in this phrase, planeta o muerte, planet or death. You see it in a lot of different words, phrases, ideas, concepts, policy proposals, the idea of a people's tribunal on Mother Earth, for crimes against Mother Earth, or tribunals to look at, paying debt back to countries devastated by industrial waste and industrial practices. So it's powerful stuff. I haven't, quite frankly, sorted it all through because it's a lot to take in.
Talk a little about buen vivir, living well.
Living well. It's a core concept to the Quechua, Aymara, and other indigenous peoples here, and it's what I understood of it is that that's a core principle that they're trying to, example, institute into their constitution. I got to interview one of the architects of the Bolivian constitution. I was just fascinated listening to this brilliant man talking about how they took these traditional nation-state structures and then are now adjusting them to create plurinational state of Bolivia, the many national. So like he even said, the nation-state as we knew it is dead, and it's dead for a lot of reasons. But these people here in Bolivia are especially clear about how thoroughly and absolutely dead the nation-state structure is and how dangerous it is. If, for example, we in the United States understood that our citizenship has been humiliated and devastated beyond repair, when you have 2 stolen elections, when you have, a political structure where, people are making decisions based on filth, lies, stupidity. Quite frankly, that is what a lot of what is on Fox and on other media in the United States. And so to come here to a place where it seems, this is an older culture, and we have a lot to learn from them politically, because people here are thoroughly informed, and I really believe it's kind of the interrogation of the nation state. If we in the United States understood how thoroughly obsolete many of the ideas of the nation state that we have are, for example, that our citizenship has been humiliated by corporate citizenship. Corporations run our lives. Let's face that. It's a fact. It's undeniable. They elected Barack Obama. We didn't. Okay? Let's be clear about that. And so if you consider that, then we need to start thinking more about, and this is the beauty of the crisis we're in, right? The opportunity and the danger, if you're Chinese, is that, the danger we know, but the opportunity is to break the egg, the cosmic egg of consciousness around the stale ideas that dominate our lives in the United States. That's beautiful for me as a writer, as an activist, as a person that grew up in the United States. I see such great opportunity to transform, and see real change, not the kind of anemic ideas of hope and change embodied by the Democratic Party and Barack Obama.
How do you think you could take the real tragic crisis of climate migration, which we're also seeing in the U.S., the way north in Alaska, the Gwich'in people, who their caribou herd habitat is changing, they're having to move, the polar bear are on the ice which is breaking up, and the polar bear are getting stranded and can't fish. How do you think we could talk to the American people about climate migration in a way to get them to truly understand that they have a responsibility, and really it's a spiritual call to come forward and really take this thing on and acknowledge the role of that here you are, Americans, 24% of the global population, 25% of the current emissions. People bring up China and say, oh, we're equal with China. Well, we're not equal with China. China's per capita emissions are about 3 or 4 to 5 per person. The average of the U.S. is 20 tons per person per year. Now, of course, there's a range of poor people in the U.S. who are not contributing. And there are people in the U.S. who are contributing way beyond. Mm-hmm. And yet their real people's lives are being completely destroyed where they've been for centuries. How do we talk about that to get better understanding and really political action and an end to the debate whether or not this is real in the US?
I think one of the things, local consciousness, local organizing, local as your own body. I think really the older I get, the more I realize how much a source of inspiration and of political thought and practice that our own bodies are. Our bodies, like any other animals, reflect the devastation that we're doing to the planet. Our unhealth as a society reflects the unhealth of the planet, something that's talked about here regularly. We heard it throughout this conference. You won't have, for example, make any difference on climate change unless you fundamentally redistribute wealth and change the structures of political and economic structures of inequality. If you don't remove inequality, then the decision making that comes from the top down, the people that tell Barack Obama what to do, are going to continue telling us what to do. And so, that's, what is that, revolution? I don't know, but we have a top down. The teabaggers know this. Even the teabaggers know that we're being taken, that there are powers greater than Barack Obama. They just don't know how to articulate where, because nobody's telling them. And I think it starts locally with our bodies and our communities, and move up. That's how they did it here. From an internal core, we have to develop, I think, some modicum of personal political integrity that then kind of moves outward in concentric circles out. Concentric circles of culture, of alternative forms of thinking about ourselves and our relation to the planet, all this stuff really does matter. And we start with that, and then we have to rack up some victories. We have to start scaring people. And what I mean by scaring is that we have to let them know that we are a power, that we have power, that we're willing to use our power to effect change. Change didn't stop with Barack Obama. He doesn't have a monopoly on change, and he surely never had a monopoly on my hope. I had hope far before Barack Obama, and I have hope will have hope far beyond Barack Obama. He doesn't provide me any hope. In fact, I come back learning a lot about the Green Movement because I wasn't involved. And I come back feeling ashamed and angry at what Barack Obama is doing to the environment and to pollution, this offensive idea of clean coal, nuclear energy, support for the Copenhagen failure.
That's actually where I was going to go next, which is you're not only a journalist, but you're also a strategist. You're the founder, and I guess you're still the director of Presente.org.
I'm a co-founder.
Co-founder of Presente.org, which has been mobilizing in the Hispanic and Latino community in the U.S., in the internet activism model. You've had some real victories, but you're a strategic thinker. What would you like to see happen in the American people? And if you were going back and you were in charge of the climate movement in the U.S., what would you do? What would you think the next step should be?
I think the next step is you always start with conversation, I think. Real, sincere conversation at the local level, and conversation between the mostly white environmental movement and the climate justice movement that's mostly not white. And having, and then, but bringing in others now, like they did here. Here, there were people who were climate activists. There were indigenous people. There were people who are labor people. There was no distinction. And the crisis is global in scope. So the solution has to also be not just local but global in scope. And so we have to really develop a political culture that promotes the fact that we have an illusory border. People have to start realizing that the electoral system, the political system in the United States is nothing less than an absolute sham at this point in history. Our citizenship has been devalued and humiliated by corporations that can do what they want. You saw it in healthcare. You're seeing it on climate change. I see it on immigration. You see it on any number of issues.
So, Roberto, in the context, what of starting in a country where it appeared at one point that at least was going to be some new political openings, and there are some. How do we take advantage of those? And both, what do you see the mobilization, now that you're coming back from Bolivia, where are you going to go with what you've learned? And what gives you the inspiration to keep going at this point?
Well, for me, the inspiration is I hate to be cliche, but the just fabulously brilliant, powerful, and passionate people that I meet all over the world and in the United States. We have a lot of smart, very passionate, and capable people in the U.S. And we have to stop flagellating ourselves, I think, politically as on the left. I think that's not a good thing, especially now when we so desperately need to come together and save the planet. I mean, I draw inspiration from the fact that, hey, you know what, we're no longer needing to go see science fiction movies. In a science fiction movie, there's always a need to go save the planet. Well, we're in a science fiction movie now. This is no joke. Young people, you have to pick up and go. I think the next step is to really look at who the power map, where the power map lie. Who are our adversaries? We know that corporations are. We know here in Bolivia and probably in Venezuela, they're trying to undermine these governments because of the threat that they are. So we need to be aware, we need to be conscious that the United States government, with or without Barack Obama, is still the government that kills and now that threatens the entire planet, that moves on behalf of the corporations that are devastating the planet. That's the primary function of the government now. I mean, I think the idea that Obama wants us to push him back, I think is just a farce. I think they could care less. They act with impunity. They act arrogantly in different settings on different issues. There's not a big consulta popular, a popular consultation. If there was, we would have universal health care. Instead, we get this embarrassment reform, health reform. And so I don't think Barack Obama wants to be pushed by the left. I just think he wants us not to get militant, as people are in these parts of the world, militantly for the environment, militantly for children not starving, militantly for people not dying under military threats, but governments funded by the United States and President Obama. So I don't buy that. I think, and so my hope is from people that despite all this crisis have just incredible ideas about how to change and are creating new and dynamic structures I mean, it was brilliant for Evo Morales to bring all these people here. It makes it more difficult for President Obama and his national security advisors to do what they'd like to do, which is invade, undermine the revolutions here and in Venezuela. It's clear they've got all these military bases in Colombia. Never mind that President Uribe in Colombia has the worst human rights record in the hemisphere, hands down. He's killed more people than Castro, anybody here in this hemisphere. But we don't talk about that. We give them billions of dollars for military bases. Don't be fooled. If Barack Obama is not willing to stop funding military interests in Colombia, that tells you exactly who he is. Don't make up excuses for him.
So finally, you mentioned young people. You said they got to get going. How about your message to the youth? What you've had the privilege of being here. What do you want them to know about what you saw, and what should they be looking for?
I was young once myself, and for me, my most important thing is to dream, and dream really hard about a better world. Don't let anybody sell you some packaged version of a dream of hope and change. But really conceptualize and think about and feel in your heart what change and hope mean to you, and how that you can make that a reality in your life. And to get as crazy and radical as you possibly can, because oftentimes the process of getting older is for gravity to bring you down back to earth. And so shoot as high as the ozone layer and beyond, because we need you to do that. Your generation has to save the planet. Simple. So that's my great hope. My great hope is young people.
And you're glad you came to Cochabamba?
I'm absolutely motivated, energized by being here in Cochabamba among these beautiful people, not just the Quechuas, but all these beautiful and great people who we're coming together, and we have a common mission to save the planet. Wow. Be a part of it.
Let's go one more round. What was it like being with Morales?
Well, I'd interviewed him before, so at that meeting I found him to be the real deal. And when I first met him, he was the relatively new president of Bolivia, the first president in 500 years, a stunning accomplishment in and of itself. Now I met him, talked to him very briefly because he had to run, but to meet the man who is now kind of not just president of Bolivia, but he's kind of president of the movement to save the planet. It's quite an honor to all these accomplishments and things that he's done. I mean, there's not everything he does perfect, but wow, the vision of somebody to bring together the world. Wow, we have to all have that vision.
And to think that it's an indigenous person, do you think the fact that he comes from an indigenous background and has a direct relationship to the land as a cocalero is part of what makes him understand so deeply that the planet is in peril? I mean, what I was really impressed at the opening ceremony, there was a song that was being sung, and I've been regretting that there's not enough music and art about the peril that we face, the climate change, and the whole event opened with this beautiful song being sung in Spanish, which was "Oye, amigo, el planeta es en peligro." You know, hello, friends, the planet is in danger. I mean, that they were singing that, and they had a stadium of 15, 20,000 people singing that along. Do you think that his relationship to the land is part of what gives him?
I think that's one part, definitely the relationship to the land, the relationship to indigenous culture and thought, but also the relationship to militant labor movements, radical, revolutionary, political, organizations, indigenous thought. They were all there, like, oye, amigo, tu planeta está en peligro. Hey, friend, your planet is in danger. That's a riff on the people united will never be defeated. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. So it shows how we are not just breaking off with the ecological thought from the history of struggle in the region, but in fact building on top of it. And I think that's very, very strategic and fundamental for movements, to have a consistent line of political and thought and practice. And I'm just really inspired to meet him again.
Well, it has been inspiring to meet you. Here we are, Bing Gong, Claire Greensfellow, reporting for Transition West Marin and Ecological Options Network from the airport in Cochabamba, about to take off. It's getting dark outside. And again, Roberto Lovato from New York City, an inspiration in himself. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.